Imagine standing on the Roman banks of the Danube River in the bitter winter of 376 CE. Across the dark, ice-choked water stretches an entire civilization. Tens of thousands of men, women and children are gathered on the opposite shore, their breath rising like prayers in the frozen air. Behind them, somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, rides the most terrifying force the ancient world had ever known: the Huns. The Gothic people face an impossible choice: cross into Roman territory and beg for mercy, or face annihilation. This single decision would topple emperors, reshape Christianity, and ultimately transform a dying empire into the medieval world. This is the story of the Gothic migrations, one of history's most consequential journeys. To understand the Goths, we must first meet them in their homeland. By the 3rd century CE, the Gothic peoples had established themselves north of the Black Sea, in territories spanning modern-day Ukraine and Romania. They weren't a single unified nation, but rather a collection of tribes sharing a common language and culture. Historically, they were known as the Tervingi in the west and the Greuthungi in the east, groups we now remember as the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, or the West and East Goths. Contrary to Roman propaganda that painted them as savage barbarians, the Goths had developed a sophisticated society. They were skilled metalworkers, accomplished horsemen, and shrewd traders. When the missionary Ulfilas arrived in the 4th century, many Goths embraced Christianity, though in its Aryan form. They believed that God the Father was the supreme deity, distinct from and superior to Christ the Son. This set them apart from the Nicene Christians of the Roman elite, who followed the creed of a co-equal Trinity. This religious friction would ensure that even as the Goths integrated into the empire, they remained a people apart. For generations, the Goths and Romans existed in an uneasy equilibrium, but in 375 CE, everything changed. The Huns, nomadic warriors from the Central Asian steppes, swept westward like a human avalanche. The survivors faced a stark reality: submit to Hunnic rule or flee westward into Roman lands. The Visigothic leader Fritigern made a choice that would echo through centuries. In 376, he led his people to the Danube and requested asylum. Emperor Valens, seeing an opportunity to gain new taxpayers and recruits, agreed, but with conditions that revealed Roman arrogance. What followed was a humanitarian disaster. Roman officials, corrupt and contemptuous, were supposed to provide food. Instead, they exploited the refugees mercilessly. In one of history's most harrowing accounts, the Romans forced the starving Goths to sell their children into slavery in exchange for the meat of stray dogs. For every dog provided, a family gave up a child. Pushed beyond endurance, the Goths rebelled in 377. On August 9th, 378, near the city of Adrianople, the two forces met. The Gothic cavalry shattered the Roman lines. In the chaos, Emperor Valens himself perished. His body was never found, leaving the empire without a leader or a state funeral. 2/3 of the Eastern Roman field army died in a single afternoon. The myth of Roman invincibility lay broken in the Thracian dust. The new emperor, Theodosius I, recognized the Goths could not be destroyed. In 382, he negotiated a revolutionary settlement. The Goths would settle within the empire as federates, maintaining their own laws while providing military service. This arrangement was unprecedented, signaling a shift in Roman policy, from conquering barbarian peoples to incorporating them as partners in the empire's survival. It also foreshadowed the empire's transformation from a monolithic power to a patchwork of semi-autonomous communities. But the empire was fracturing. When Theodosius died, the Visigoths, led by Alaric, resumed their march. In 410, the unthinkable happened. Alaric's Visigoths sacked Rome. It was a psychological earthquake, an event that shook the very heart of Christendom and reverberated across the Mediterranean world. Yet, because the Goths were Christians, they spared the great basilicas, seeking supplies and recognition rather than total destruction, showing that even in conquest, values and faith could temper violence. After Alaric, his successor Ataulf led the Visigoths into southern Gaul and Hispania, establishing the Kingdom of Toulouse in 418, the first independent barbarian kingdom on Roman soil. These new kingdoms were more than military strongholds. They became centers of cultural blending, where Roman administrators, Gothic warriors, and local populations interacted, traded, and created new forms of governance. Meanwhile, the Ostrogoths eventually regained their freedom from the Huns. Under their greatest king, Theodoric, they conquered Italy in 493. Theodoric's reign represented a remarkable synthesis, Gothic and Roman, Arian and Nicene, coexisting in a fragile but creative peace. His court in Ravenna became a symbol of this fusion, adorned with mosaics that celebrated both Roman artistry and Gothic identity. The Gothic migrations didn't destroy Roman civilization, they transformed it. The Goths didn't erase Roman law and culture, they became its protectors. In the libraries of Visigothic Spain, scholars preserved classical texts that would have otherwise vanished. Their legal codes, blending Germanic custom with Roman law, would influence Europe for centuries. Across Gaul, Hispania and Italy, Gothic rulers established new political orders that retained Roman administrative practices while adapting to local traditions, laying the foundations for medieval Europe. The desperate refugees who crossed the Danube in 376, seeking only survival, became the architects of a new world. Their journey reminds us that history's great transformations often begin with ordinary people facing impossible choices. The Goths didn't just conquer Europe, they became part of it. Their legacy lives in our institutions, our languages, and the very map of the modern world. And in that legacy, we see a profound truth. Empires may fall, but the ideas, cultures, and peoples they touch continue to shape the world in ways no conqueror could ever have predicted. Gothic rulers adapted Roman administration to local traditions, laying the foundations of medieval Europe. The desperate refugees who crossed the Danube in 376, seeking only survival, became architects of a new world. Their journey reminds us that history's greatest transformations often begin with ordinary people confronting impossible choices. In their legacy, we see a profound truth. Ideas and cultures endure far beyond empires, shaping the world in ways no conqueror could ever foresee.